Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast. Danny, how's it going? Good morning.
Dude, doing well, doing the grind, the hustle, that sort of thing.
The hustle, good. I heard you've been talking a lot with New York this morning, trying to get all your shipment taken care of.
Yep, that's correct. I've been having some hiccups with custom brokers. You can never, ever go to sleep on any part of the importing, manufacturing, any part of the food industry, it sounds like to me, Matt.
Yeah, and Danny, so let's see, a couple weeks back we talked why you shouldn't start a food startup. And we could even take it a step further, maybe why, reasons not to be an entrepreneur. I'll tell you one thing, there is something nice about having a job where you work a set of hours and, once you leave, you're done with the job. But being an entrepreneur, it's not just about emailing people and asking them to get things done or calling them. You have to continually follow up, because if something gets delayed by a week in a big company, you might be able to smooth that over. But with a small company, you need to be on people, and that's the only way really to do it.
Yeah, you better be able to be making phone calls at 9-10 p.m. at night to designers, to manufacturers, to shippers, and you better be able to be up early at doing the same thing. And it's a 24-hour job, and you got to love that. If you don't love it, then you're not going to be successful at it. I can tell you that right now.
Also, the incentives, right? Especially we talk about this all the time, being small fish. Today we have a large whale on the show in terms of a huge company, and we're going to introduce them in a little bit. But, they may not have the incentive if you're only paying them a couple $100, a couple $1,000, to really give you great service. So you just have to really be persistent, and I think we've talked about this before. One of the disadvantages of getting started, it's worth repeating, because you have to be on those people. You can't just assume that you sent them an email on Monday that things are going to be taken care of. You're going to have to follow up on Wednesday and Thursday.
I think that you need to demand excellence of every single partner that you work with, all the way in through the supply chain. It has to be excellent. And it's hard to do that sometimes, right? It's hard to do that when other companies have bigger fish to fry, to keep on stringing along the metaphor. But, if you do it, you know how to get things out of people. One thing that you and I have talked about a lot has been following up, finding excuses to follow up, whether it's wishing somebody a happy birthday, wishing their friends or family a happy birthday, saying you forgot to do something, casually stopping by. Do it over and over and over again until you get what you need to move on to the next step.
Danny, just thinking about today and persistence, we have a guest, and I'm speaking for myself here, Danny, but I wouldn't really be able to network with our guest today if we didn't have this podcast. So I'm really grateful for our podcast just for that. This guy has a huge, successful $35 million a year company, and we're going to bring him on in just a few seconds here.
It's a real pleasure to talk to folks of much more experience than we do in the industry that have been through a lot. It's great to be in this position to talk to these folks who are willing to pass this knowledge on to other folks who are getting started out. And it's going to be super to be able to ask a few pretty good questions to our guests. Let's go ahead and introduce them.
All right. So our guest today is Jeff Moore. He is the president of two companies, International Pacific Seafoods and Wild Things Seafood. He is also a trusted advisor to distributors, chain restaurant operators, as well as other industry professionals.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you being here and your willingness to talk to us a little bit about your experience in food. I thought I'd just start off and ask how you got your start in seafood.
Well, first, it's an honor to be on your show. I really appreciate it. And one thing I think is important to understand that I'm actually fourth generation food service in Southern California. So it goes way back to my great grandfather that owned a Huntington Beach Ice here in Southern California in Orange County. And they also produced soda pop as well in that plant. And then in a chance meeting in the 1930s, my grandfather was selling a tie to a gentleman at a department store and got into a conversation about the beverage business. And my grandfather's a very engaging person, super talented guy. And in that chance meeting where he was selling the tie, he was actually offered the Pepsi-Cola bottling franchise for Orange County, California for free.
Wow.
He was talking to the son of the founder of the Pepsi-Cola bottling company, and they were having challenges with the person that was making their Pepsi in Southern California. And he was really really impressed with my grandfather and said, look, if you can make this thing work, he goes, we'll give you the franchise. And they did that, and they made it work. And actually in Orange County back in the later 50s, Pepsi-Cola had a higher per capita consumption than Coca-Cola did. My grandfather was like the first, put the first fountains into Disneyland, was just an incredible guy. Wrote like some of the first time motion studies in retail, and was the president of the Retail Grocers and Sales and Marketing Association. So he was a big time influence on the people in my family. And then my father got into the business driving a truck for Pepsi. It was my mother's father, but he drove a truck for Pepsi. My father did, and then got into different services. ARA, it used to be called ARA Services at the time, and now it's called Aramark. And then got into distribution, worked for PYA Monarch, for Kraft, for Rykoff, and was the founder of Fresh Point, which is a large produce company that was thusly sold to Cisco Food Service. Mm-hmm. And I started right out of college. I was working. I'd been really kind of working. I'd been in sales and marketing myself since I was in 8th grade, selling lawn aeration door to door for a young entrepreneur, junior in high school that's making like $10,000 a month doing this. And so I've been in sales forever. Worked in the warehouse at PY Monarch as I was going through high school. Sweeping under pallets in the freezers at 5 o'clock in the morning between shifts. And so I understood, the distribution business. Naturally, when I graduated from UCLA, I went into food service distribution as a sales rep, went from zero business to about $100,000 a week in sales, grew the business and just was really working really long hours, 100-hour work weeks, and decided I wanted to get into manufacturing. Got into manufacturing where I was representing companies like Kellogg's, Gallo Salami, McCain Citrus, different companies like that. Got into the food service brokerage where I was representing people, representing companies selling to multi-unit restaurants and distributors alike. Worked for Fresh Point for a little while, grew their business from $1 million to $18 million the first year in their non-produce sales. And then we bought, we ended up buying, after we sold this to Fresh Point to Cisco, we bought the seafood company in 1999. And we were doing about, the company was doing just under $1 million a month in sales when we bought the company. Came in as a sales manager and then vice president of sales, and I've been the president since 2002. And we do approximately $35 million a year now.
And Jeff, so you mentioned some interesting things here. You were a broker. When you worked in manufacturing for, I think you mentioned Kellogg's?
I was area sales manager for Kellogg's and Gallo Salami. I worked for them as their Western region sales manager. And same thing with McCain Citrus. Not
just your family background of entrepreneurs, but just all the jobs you've had even before you graduated college. You've been in food and you've been a part of, a lot of different parts of the industry. Now, with International Pacific Seafood, when you guys bought this company in 1999, can you tell us about one or two big changes you made to the company?
Well, the company was originally founded by a gentleman by the name of Vince DeCorpo. And when he found the company, he was a broker. He was representing companies out here. He had worked on the Fulton Fish Market back in New York and moved out to Southern California and started representing companies like BC Packers, who he worked for, and other companies, Icelandic, all sorts of different companies. And as he was continuing to build his brokerage business and generating income, he started to see opportunities where he could import products. And back in the mid 1970s, he started importing calamari steaks out of Taiwan and built that into a nice business. Started importing other products and became a broker and importer. And by the time we bought the company, he had really done away with the brokerage side of the business and was just a wholesaler or a trader and an importer. And so the first thing we did, because I had such a vast experience in the brokerage business, is we started representing companies right away again, and developing a full line of seafood. Even if we didn't import it or buy and sell it, we had full array of seafood to offer through our brokerage company as well. So that was like the first thing that we did. The next thing we did upon Cisco Food Service was a big customer of ours as we had bought the company. Cisco Food Service asked us to start our own processing company because they wanted us to produce under their brand. And we did that. So within a couple of years, we went from just being an importer trader to an importer processor broker and trader, really hitting the business from all angles. So that was probably the biggest thing that we did as we came in.
Was this the plan? Was the plan in 1999 to buy this company and you knew what you were going to do? Or why this company and why fish? I mean, I'm sure there are many reasons, but can you go into just one or two?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we grew up in the food business, and so we always understood that the center of the plate, meaning the protein, center of the plate, if you own the center of the plate, you own the account, essentially. And so those relationships with the center of the plate, in the center of the plate supply chain, are some of the deepest and most sustainable relationships out there. And they can be profitable. I mean, as much as profitable can be in the commodity end of this business. We saw this seafood opportunity. My dad had been a major shareholder, obviously, but the bank, the investor owned more than he did at FreshPoint. My dad had a difference of opinion of where he wanted to take that company, and the guy that had the majority shareholder ended up winning. And my dad learned, hey, you know what? You want to own something, you better own at least 51% of it. So he bought this company. He had an opportunity with one of the gentlemen that was working for him that had left FreshPoint and gone to work for this company, and said, hey, this guy's looking to sell, and this is a great opportunity. And so that's what we did.
Great. So it sounds like it was sort of a move to establish a strong foundation in this sub-industry. And you also mentioned sustainable. Were there things going on, or I know that the food industry is always changing. So were there some things going on that really led you guys to decide, hey, listen, we want to be in this space. We think we can do it better. And also we like the profile of the sub-industry.
That's a good question. And I'll tell you, we'd always been in distribution, or at least my father had always been in distribution. So he didn't have a lot of experience on the supply side. But the one thing that we knew we didn't want to be was a distributor anymore. We could always do that, but we wanted to work with the people that we knew within the distribution world, within the chain world, and be a supplier and be a supplier the way we felt it should be. And there was a lot of things that were broken back then. I think there's still a lot of things that are broken in the supply chain with what people believe is real support. But we were different. We became their team. We became part of their team, and we guided them towards greater sales when we were working with the distributors. It was something that they could always call on us, whether it was our seafood or not, or was it something that was relative to what we were selling or not. They knew they could always call us and count on us to help them create the account, penetrate the account, anything. So we really had something different that we offered.
I don't really understand the fish industry or the seafood industry as far as how it works. And lots of different industries in food, they are structured in a different way. For the end consumer in the restaurant and the end consumer in the supermarket, how does seafood get to them? Through what linkages?
Okay, that's a great question. There's the supply chain, and I actually have a diagram for this, but it's okay. It goes literally from whoever's catching the fish or harvesting the fish or or seafood, if you will. It goes from there to what we call a packer, and that is the primary processor or packer of the product that will take that fish out in its whole form and create it into a more processable form. Whether that's headed and gutted and scaled or fillets. At that point, it is by the packer. The packer will now sell it to either an importer or a wholesaler or directly to a distributor. Then that distributor will sell it to the end user, and then the end user, obviously, the end user being the operator like Cheesecake Factory or Darden restaurants, whether it's Olive Garden or Red Lobster or somebody like that. They will then produce that in their restaurant and sell it to on the menu to their customers.
Excellent.
We see ourselves as providers of seafood and providers of seafood solutions, and in that relationship, we become trusted advisors to many distributors as well as a lot of end user operators, restaurants or hotels or any type of end user operator, the one that's selling to the consumer. And so we call the guy that literally just says, "Hey, I've got fish, you've got money," and wants to sell the distributor. And International Pacific is different. We feel a provider is in every one of those conversations and adding value in every one of those conversations, even to the point where a distributor has a customer and maybe doesn't want that customer to be contacted by their suppliers, because then they don't have control. But if it's a large enough account, we're definitely going directly to the end user operator, and we're selling them directly, and then they just tell us where they want that distributed. And that's called pull-through. And that's really the most effective way of getting your product into a distributor.
Pull-through. Okay, great. Now, and Jeff, just to sum this up for the listeners, and I'm going to infer here, tell me if I'm wrong, but when you mentioned a couple minutes ago how you didn't want to be just a distributor, and it seems like you were unhappy with the way many parts of the supply chain were being handled, so you kind of expanded to handle more parts of that to be that provider of seafood solutions.
Right. We couldn't be a distributor because we knew that the distributor was going to be one of our customers in that supply chain. And so we were not going to be a distributor, but we were going to be a supplier, but we didn't even like that. So we literally coined our phrase that we're a provider. And in that creates this kind of diagram or these critical control points of the conversations that are taking place in the supply chain that says, look, the real user, the real decision maker, the real customer in this process is the end user, is the restaurant. The restaurant is going to use this product, is literally going to prepare it and sell it to their consumer. A distributor is there to distribute that product. And while a distributor provides massive leverage for a supplier, a manufacturer to get their products into the marketplace, if you don't have pull-through, if you don't have interest in your product, that distributor is going to, one, charge you a lot of money to have a slot in that distribution, but two, could very well turn it back to you and say, you know what, this isn't selling, take it back.
Leads us to a little bit of a segue. Jeff, talk to us a little bit about quality. You mentioned a little bit about the fact that your providers, sounds like you're providing a service and providing quality that's higher. And I see on your website that you guys differentiate yourselves somehow. So how does quality come into play?
Okay. I guess quality, first and foremost for me, and I think that we can all agree, is quality is actually the way it's supposed to be. It's what you expect, and it's what you expect it to be all the time. Quality control is maintaining a certain specification. Performance is a totally different thing. And so the first thing that we provide is to be able to say that, look, what you get today is the same thing that you can expect next week and the same thing you can expect next month and next year. So our quality is something that is, we drive a level of expectation. The performance and the specification that we produce our product under, whether it's a smaller size range, the seafood industry, when they say something is 8 ounces, commonly that product can be anywhere from 7.01 ounces to 8.99 ounces. And we just don't think that that is an 8-ounce product. So we produce things within plus or minus a half ounce. We produce tighter ranges. We eliminate the trim on the product. So somebody doesn't have to, I mean, there's still going to be skin on product or whatever, but there's belly trim or nape trim or collar trim or tail trim that we will trim out of the product, because then that becomes more usable. There's more usable product per pound. And that's a big deal. A customer that is able to tell the manufacturer of the product, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. And if you've got my business card, if you've ever seen my business card, we ask 5 questions on the back of the business card. And it's, what are you using now? And literally we want to see it. We want to take a picture of the label and everything. But the next thing and the most important thing is, what are you doing with it? More often than not, we hear somebody say, get me an 8-ounce piece of mahi-mahi. And we're like, okay, so that if that was to a supplier, the supplier would say, here's my 8-ounce piece of mahi-mahi. Because it's me, I'm saying, what are you doing with it? Oh, well, I'm cutting it into 4-ounce pieces and serving it. Well, why don't I just sell you a 4-ounce piece? Well, because I don't want the tails. And every time somebody sells me 4-ounce, they're tails. So why don't we specify a 4-ounce piece of mahi-mahi, bloodline out, skinless product that has no tails in it? You can do that? Yeah. Well, how do I get that? Ask. What is good for me in my application might not be the same application that Matt needs. And so it's individual to those things. Now, there are common applications, and there's recognition of this specification as being a higher performing specification across a broader range of customers, and so we will definitely do that. But it's the ability to predict the results of your effort that, and as a restaurateur, that really creates that higher level of expectation that we put into the relationship.
Great, Jeff. That was a really good example with the 8 and 4 ounce cuts. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to transition into managing the risk profile of the people that are actually out there fishing and getting these fish from the ocean, right? The packers. Jeff, how do you determine a risk profile of the packers? Not just quality, but, I imagine a certain health scare could arise with a certain fish, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, all of the people that we source our product from, all packers that we source our product from, the first thing that we go through is we look and see their situation as far as, do they have a hazard analysis and critical control plan, which HACCP is a really important part of this. What is their record? If we're importing this product, what is their record? Are they a green ticket provider with FDA? Are they being assessed by a third-party agency, USDC or the BRC, which is something that's big over the British Retail Commission over in Europe? Are they EU approved? There's different elements that we're looking at as far as their track record and who they provide for. And that's pretty much the first thing that we look at, because that's that they want to know that we're just not buying from anybody off the street. That's a big deal. The other thing is we go through a 3-step process when we are importing the product. We tell them what our specification is. They provide us with their production reports that shows that they're following our expectation. And then when it's brought over here, we do what we call a QC, a quality control. We look at that product, we measure it versus the specification and their production report. And then on more frequent occasion now than in the past, we send our products, especially our high moving products, to a third-party evaluation lab and have that product evaluated again.
Okay, great. Now, Jeff, one thing that Danny and I and a lot of our listeners have have dealt with and we continue to deal with, some good experiences, some not quite as successful, is with customs brokers. I assume you've worked with tons and tons of customs brokers. What can you tell us about that? Like, I don't think they're all created equal, and how do you choose a customs broker?
That's a great question. I will tell you that we've used only two that I can think of right now, and I can't even remember the second one, but Williams Clark is one that we use, and they've been a great partner of ours, very communicative, have helped us through processes, because we do. FDA looks at some of this product and they will reject it, or they will hold it. And so we go through a lot of that. And Williams Clark has been good. And I'm trying to think of the other guy. And I can't think of his other name, but we've had a great deal of success. I think Williams Clark is also has a great deal of, and many, many years, decades, if you will, of experience in the seafood industry. Wow.
And one last question, on the supply chain, what about the risk profile of buyers or distributors? Some that won't pay late, or that pay really late, hurting your cash flow, or that don't pay at all.
Right, and that's a big problem. We rely heavily on a service called CFAX, SEAFAX, that monitors the credit worthiness of companies, and they are always giving credit ratings out and updating these reports. And then we also will use Dun & Bradstreet just to do an extra check. And what you'll find for us, knock wood, is that we find ourselves with the larger broadline distributors that are more creditworthy and more stable. And we have not had the issue. God, I can't remember when the last time we've had somebody go out on us bankrupt. I think it was, I want to say 9 years ago, maybe.
Definitely. That's cool. And listen, I want to jump in. First of all, it's been awesome learning about the industry that you've been in. It's awesome to kind of picture it. And one thing I haven't heard about, maybe you can touch on a little bit, is just how things have changed. And, you mentioned that you guys are providers of seafood solutions. Why did you do that? Did you start doing that immediately? Did that come in as kind of core competency for you guys later? And what has changed in the past 15 years?
Well, I mean, obviously technology has had a lot to do with it, and what people even do with technology. I think that, for the longest time it was kind of a plaything. If you had a website, that was a really big point of difference for you. And then everybody had websites, so everybody's putting more and more emphasis on all the cool stuff in their website that nobody ever looks at. And now we've seen it kind of roll back to, I'm working with on changing my website now, and I've gone through so many iterations of what I want to do that I've gone from these very expensive platforms to, on the IPS, we're just finishing it up, we're going to be using a basic WordPress with optimized press on it. And, it's going to be almost like a 4-page website. And it's going to answer the questions that people want to know, and we're going to be able to guide them through that. What are they looking for when they're looking on our website? It's very different than an e-commerce website like we have on Wild Things, but even on the Wild Things seafood side, we went from spending, $2,000, $2,500 a month to have a website managed and going through all the hiccups with that, to spending $179 on Shopify, and it's a full turnkey solution, and so I think that the cost of technology has dropped. I think what we're beginning to see, and we're going to continue to see it, and I'm going to tell you that this is going to be this. There's an evolution that's going on right now. And it's been done a little bit, but it's going to be done in an even greater sense. And that is this hyper contact and engagement between the supplier and the end user of product. Even shows as we know it, going to, whether it's the Expo West or the Boston Seafood Show, where I was just, which is now the North American Seafood Expo, or Seafood Expo North America, whatever it's called. And all those things where it's just a big conglomeration of buyers and sellers, they're going to move to more hyper-focused things like they're doing with First Source, where you go, you meet people face to face at maybe a social function. You have a vendor fair that's very similar like these big shows, but maybe that lasts for just a few hours. You're up on stage. You get 8 minutes to present yourself, and then you set up the suppliers will set up appointments in a following day. I mean, that type of hyper engagement, that type of close engagement. The cool thing that I'm seeing is direct response. So if you're a direct response guy like I am, man, we are about to see a renaissance in food service and B2B. And where I'm looking at watching Sysco and US Foods come together to go from a Sysco is a $42 billion, $44 billion company, and US Foods is a $21 billion company into this $65 billion juggernaut. And I'm looking at who are the suppliers? What are the suppliers going to do when they're on the outside? How are they going to get their products to the market? They can use the smaller distributors, but I tend to think that there's a young man that's sitting on the sidelines right now by the name of Jeff Bezos with this little company called Amazon.com that is going to be really in the forefront of bringing product to market in the B2B space like he has in the B2C space.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's fascinating to me.
Remember, when I started in this business, I mean, seafood went from telex to fax. And when the fax machine came out and anybody could broadcast fax their price list, they said, oh man, this is the end of the industry. And then it was from fax to email. And he was like, oh, now, everybody's on these lists. And it's not about competing with your product against somebody else's product. At this point, it's about competing for attention. And if your brand doesn't include a story that is starring your customer using your product or service, and if your brand identity isn't the moral of that story where the customer lives happily ever after using your product or service with a continued engagement between the two of you, you're going to be left out. Technology is going to consume you. Because if you don't have something specific, if you're not addressing the needs, desires, challenges, fears, and aspirations of your customer and articulating it better than they can to themselves and guiding them almost subconsciously, yeah, man, you're going to be behind.
Interesting. So just a quick follow-up. So you have two companies. You have Wild Things Seafood as well as International Pacific Seafood. So how are they related in that kind of sphere of communication? Do they kind of buttress one another?
Not really. Wild Things Seafood, remember, again, 4th generation in Orange County, so chances are we know a couple of people. And they're always asking about our seafood, and we would always have great access to great steak as well because we're in the business and we know the people to go to. And people would always be asking, hey, how can we get some of this stuff? How can we get the same stuff that you're creating for these great restaurants? How can we get that for our home? And so back in 2009, my dad's like, yeah, I want to open a retail store. And I'm like, oh boy, 2009, you're opening a retail store? I can hear a giant flushing sound. And so instead we started a warehouse sale, and we did some direct response marketing to bring people in. We ended up doing like $3,500 in sales in our first, or like $2,500 in our first Saturday that we opened, which was huge for us. And we just kept going. I started doing some more stuff online, trying to go a little bit more global. But what we're finding is the majority of our customers are still local. And so we continued to grow the warehouse sales, and we do like one a month. And now we're not even doing one a month. We do about $11,000 to $13,000 in a Saturday in 5 hours. It's literally packed. But now we're moving away from that because, hey, that's still, for a company that's doing $35 million to get excited about something on the other side that's doing $13,000 in a day, it's just whatever, And so we are now pushing it into more of a local, hey, you want to order it and pick it up. As a matter of fact, before this interview, there was somebody that ordered a big order from us online, because now we've kind of trained them to go online, and we were short on the king salmon. So like the king salmon was short last week when these people picked up their product. I literally, on my way over to my home office, I called the guy up. I go, hey, we got the king salmon. You want me to bring it by? He's like, you'll do that? And I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. And so we do it. And quite frankly, the B2C space to me is like recess. I could take everything that I know in direct response marketing and all the things that are just fun about that personal engagement and blowing people away and creating such remarkable service that they literally remark all the time about it. To me, that is like the funnest thing in the world. In B2B, it kind of gets muffled because of all the channels and positions that you've got to get through in the business.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by just looking at your website, looking at the beautiful pictures on Wild Things Seafood and seeing how well it works. I'm just shocked that you guys were able to transition or produce something like that. It just requires a tremendous amount of work, and it's really impressive. It's managing some skill sets that not many people know how to do.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know, maybe it looks hard from your side of it. That website we transitioned from, like I said, spending $2,500 a month into having a complete turnkey website for $179 a month with Shopify. And that template that you see there was $140. Wow. Literally, we pressed a button and all that crap went in. It was... I'd love for it to sound like it was that difficult, but quite frankly, a person that wants to engage, somebody that wants to build a brand, and like I said, a brand is a story starring your customer using your product or service. If somebody can get into business so easy right now. Now, having stuff manufactured, that's tough, and that's where guys like you and Real Sharp Consultants can help people navigate the waters in a sea of uncertainty, if you will. But the business, if you've got a salsa, or you've got a spiced pickle or something that you're doing, you can create a social play, and you can create a level of recognition from a very local standpoint, and build that business quite easily with today's technology platforms. It's almost too scary.
So this would definitely be part of the advice you leave. Utilizing technology, it's so accessible, it's a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get started in, and link it up to direct response marketing. But we wanted to finish up, if you could leave our listeners with any other type of advice to be successful in the food industry, what would it be?
Give your stuff away for free. I am amazed at people that say, okay, I put a website up, I've got a buy now button, and nobody's coming to my website. No kidding. I've put a few articles up or a few posts up, and I've done some videos on YouTube, and I've done this, and I've only gotten 2 people to buy. No kidding. You know what? Go to it, and maybe you guys can see it. I don't know if it's still up, but when we went into our second version of Wild Things, I had a site called freeseafoodandsteaks.com, and we gave $30 worth of seafood and steaks away for free, one-time shot, free shipping. And, that costs us some money. But you know what? At the end of the day, think about what your real numbers are. And if you know your numbers, you know that, hey, $30 worth of seafood and steaks might cost me $16. Okay. So what is my acquisition cost per customer, and what does that customer, what is then the lifetime or the annual value of that customer if I continue to engage? And I knew that for me, the average order size was $119. And so giving $16, for my cost away plus free shipping, which was local, and it was, like $5 to ship it, $21 acquisition cost for a customer was nothing.
Wow. And sorry, Jeff, just to follow up. So with that promotion, did you generate any press?
Yeah, I think we. I mean, there was some press for sure. There was a lot of people talking about it on social media. Actually, I don't know if you guys follow Perry Belcher and Ryan Dice over at Digital Marketer, but Perry Belcher on stage was talking about Wild Things. He thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Dean Jackson, who's a guru and a mentor, a friend of mine, he literally helped me create that. So did Joe Polish. And then my good friend Jay Abraham helped me fortify that with the lifetime value of a customer, being able to identify that customer acquisition strategy. If I'm a new business right now and I've got product and I've got I've got maybe a little bit of inventory out there, and I look at all these people on Shark Tank and say, oh, I got a bunch of inventory I got to sell. If I'm even a restaurant, I'm giving stuff away for free. I'm giving free coupons away. A restaurant, to me, if somebody got into the restaurant business, instead of advertising in a newspaper or whatever, I'd go seek out the most affluent neighborhood or the neighborhood that really connected with who what my food was and what my culture in my restaurant and the experience that I had. I would offer $50 coupons to every single person in that neighborhood. I'd direct mail it out. It only costs you the mail, and when somebody comes in to eat at your restaurant, it costs you money. And I would say to anybody that's starting out, get ready to give stuff away.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome advice, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that kind of falls into the category, I guess, of that people really seem to get more and more of delighting your customers, really exceeding their expectations. And it's surprising to actually hear it in food sometimes, because industry is not like that sometimes. On the customer experience side, when it's about a restaurant, it's about someone sending back something at a restaurant or things being too highly priced. And so to hear that, it's refreshing and it's cool. And so I definitely appreciate that.
Great.
Jeff, we really wanted to thank you for coming on to the show today. We've learned a lot. Listeners, we're going to have all these links posted online to everything that we talked about today.
It's been a lot of fun, guys.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks so much for listening. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.